Hey, Katie, it's that time of year again. If you're a stylist, a salon owner, or someone who just loves this industry, I want to invite you to the room that feels like home. Presley Poe and Friends is happening April 25th and 26th in Frederick, Maryland. It isn't about the hype. It's about you belonging.
This weekend's about community, real connection, real conversation. Presley Poe themselves is the heartbeat of this event, and they're bringing people they genuinely believe in. Ruth Roche, Jackie Davis, Krista Bartik, Cynthia Lumsey, these are artists that care about the room, not just the stage.
You will learn, you'll be inspired, but more than anything, you'll be seen. Whether you're early in your career or decades in, this is the space where you can exhale and remember why you chose this industry in the first place.
Now, seats are limited, and this room fills fast. If this feels like something you need right now, don't wait. Grab your ticket at PresleyPoeandFriends.com, and we can't wait to welcome you.
Please do me
Hey, welcome to your day off. My name is Corey, and I'm sitting here with my best friend, Katie. What's up, man?
Hey, how's it going?
Not a whole bunch. What's going on?
Happy New Year,
Happy. It's weird though, right?
right?
So
Because it's mid-February.
is there some kind of rule though where like even with our clients, is it like January 31st when you stop saying New
It's
Year's?
like the first time you see someone after the New Year. We were on the phone with Kate, and she's like, "Happy New Year." We're like, "Yes, February 2nd. Happy
Exactly.
New Year."
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, until you see that person, right? You still can say it.
Well, what if you only see a client twice a year? You say it in July.
Then you say it and you make yeah, you say Happy
I
New
can't-
Year. And like,
I know
huh?
I'm not introduced yet, but let's talk about
Yeah,
that. Let's be sure to let's be sure to talk about that 2 client a year thing. I know
Yeah,
I know I haven't been introed yet, but what?
we'll get to you. We'll get. Stay in your corner over there. Oh my gosh, Gordon, you totally messed up my train of thought. That's okay.
Because when we see a client in July,
Yeah,
first time for that year, then you make them feel bad. Yeah, I haven't seen you since last year,
But
and it's July.
I think January 31st, even like towards the end of January, it starts to feel weird.
I mean, okay, your choice.
Well, what is it? I'm actually interested. If you're listening to this and you have an opinion about it, get in our DMs or something, because I'm interested in what people are saying. Like, when is the last time? Or
I mean, I think
is it done by date? Is it really done?
No,
by the
I
first
think
time
by
you
the
see
end
it?
of January it is. Like,
That's it.
okay. Like you should have your
Doesn't it feel
Christmas
weird,
tree
though?
put away. You should
Right.
have all the
That's a whole nother conversation.
which I just put my tree away
Are you
yesterday.
serious? We're December 1st. January 1st.
I needed some joy, and it was the last thing. The Christmas tree was the last thing to put away.
It was the
So
last piece of joy.
it was, yes.
Yeah.
The
Now
lights are
you're gonna be
gone.
miserable for the rest of the year.
Yeah,
Till
probably.
December.
Christmas is my favorite time of year.
Happy New Year.
Thank you. Yes.
Hey, so today we actually usually do this earlier, but because of some complications, we couldn't do it earlier this year. However, it's definitely my favorite recurring podcast that we do. Might be our only recurring podcast. Let me put it up that. Might be our only recurring one. But it's State of the Industry with Gordon Miller. Gordon's somewhat retired and not retired, and he's got
No.
man, he's got all these things. I don't know. We'll get into it. But I love this conversation. I definitely we'll start off the conversation with Gordon about how did last year fare? And then I'm really curious as to his 2 cents about moving forward and what that looks like. I've always promised Gordon that I'm going to do a ticker of like all the predictions he made and to see. But to me, it's more about the conversation and more about his opinion about what the state of the industry is. Mr. Gordon Miller, welcome back, buddy.
Thank you. It's so good to be here. I am not retired. Now, cheers. I don't know if you can see that. My coffee cup says Puerto Vallarta, which is where my husband and I moved to. I do live down here, but there's lots of people who live in the modern day world in other places besides Chicago, where I was from, and who have not retired. So just by virtue of moving to Mexico, I am not retired. I'm in fact the general manager of Intercoiffure. So another big shift in my life, probably my final chapter. The plan is to retire probably in 3 more years. And I'm so excited to be doing what I'm doing because Intercoiffure is all about kind of taking a stance for the employment-based salon model, which I think is the foundation of everything that's good in this industry. I want to have that conversation with you because I think we don't talk enough about that. And I think we've lost our way in understanding how the business models can support each other.
What, speaking about Intercoiffure, I mean, in my head, honestly, I mean, I grew up in an Intercoiffure salon, as you know.
Mhm.
I broke my bones in an Intercoiffure salon.
Yep.
To me, and I think I'm not a young buck in this industry certainly, but it seems like old school salon owners and old school
Hmm.
saloning.
Yep.
What's Intercoiffier doing to even to get the attention of like younger hairdressers and stuff? Because now there's just so many outlets for that kind of stuff. Like how's Intercoiffier redesigning or redeveloping or what are we doing? What are we doing to keep membership
So,
high?
in conversation for sure, and it's one of the reasons that I, decided to move in this direction, and I kind of manifested it. That's a whole long story, but I'm most excited. As you said, a lot of people think of it kind of, and I thought of it for a long time, it was like the country club of salon owners. That idea, it was a private club. You couldn't get into it. You had to apply, you had to, and actually you had to be referred, and a membership committee would interview you. But these are all seven-figure salons. These are amongst the most successful salons in all of America. Many of them multi-location. Not every location is seven figures, but it's that kind of salon, or that's how it began at least. And it was really well known, kind of back in the day, go back 20 years ago, that this was a group of salon owners who knew who grew up with each other in many ways, and who mentored each other, who helped each other grow. And again, some of the most successful salons that have ever existed, in the country. And so, yeah, times have changed, and they've had their share of struggles, as both salon owners and as an organization. But the things that they have always done fundamentally remain the things that everybody must do in a modern way. But they're the foundations of success in the industry, just the building blocks of a great salon, including things like education, including things like mentorship within the salon, including things like salon owners and leaders going out and finding their own mentors outside of their own comfort zone of their own salons. And having financial skills and understanding money, and how to grow a business. And so private club, but they have, as the leadership of the organizations, Scott Buchanan is the now president. They have a whole different vision, and that is to be not so much as an inward facing organization. And that's just kind of how the world was, 20 years ago. There was a lot of that across all kinds of industries. The world's changed. And so now they're looking at really being more outward facing, at sharing more with the entire industry, at taking positions about issues, which they did quietly amongst each other, but they didn't publicly, take stances on things to help the industry, in new and different ways. So when I heard what the vision, I've spoken at their last 5 events on AI. This is one of the big signs for me when I was like, oh, this is interesting and I spent 10 years as executive director of the National Cosmetology Association years ago. That was a old school association. I love that work. I loved, being involved with Cut It Out. And, they rolled into PBA. So, the disaster relief fund. I was at the beginning of those programs. And so love that work, community service work with salons. I love every bit of it. And, these guys, again, are kind of a different version of that, but they want to share. They want to help more salons grow into the kind of salons that they have. And they want to bring more salons into the organization that understand the fundamental stuff. A really close friend of mine for, I don't know, like 40 years is Sam Bricado, really kind of iconic artist, educator, New York based salon owner, very successful businessman. He said to me so many times over the course of knowing him, this one just thought that I think always is applicable, whether it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or 2 days ago. And that is that the salon industry is not complicated as a business. It just isn't. If you know the fundamentals, he says, but it's hard. It's hard. The work is hard. Doing everything you need to do is hard. And I think they want to kind of be a decoder of that and help more to get to it. And we start talking about trends, which we'll do in a minute. I think the biggest one that's impacting the salon in a negative way is just that we can't figure out what's true anymore. And I always say, I think when we get together every year, that we're so much a mirror image of the larger world, and we don't spend enough time thinking about that. If the world is confused, why wouldn't we be confused? If the world can't figure out the truth, why can't we figure out the truth? And when I mean, every part of the world of business, of politics, of beyond politics, we're all trying to figure out reality always. We look to institutions to help us with that. Institutions have been fractured in the larger world, and half the country thinks one way, and it's just not politics, just their understanding of how to live, and what works and doesn't work. And the other half thinks another way. It's never been that way my entire life. And I feel like the industry is in a very similar spot. Our institutions have fractured in many ways. Some of them are still there. And so we don't have the touch points we used to have. And it's like, what's the North Star to truth? What's the North Star to the things that really work? How did we get from an industry that was maybe 20% independent to an industry that's 60% independent, as we came out of COVID? It's amazing. It's transformational. And I think I'd like to think I understand the history and some of the truths are. So much of the shift is based on untruths, and that's damaging to people. And that's not to, and I'm not here to ever say that one way is the way to do it, or because I'm an editor coiffure that those salons are the only way to do it. They're not. And all employment salons taken together, mistakes that were made collectively is why independence blew up. So I also understand that history. So anyway, I'll stop there.
So many branches we could go off from all this.
Yes, you could.
I mean, I do think I know you hate the word artist, but I do think just from my
How
perspective,
it's how it's I hate how it's used. I hate how
how
it's
it's
used.
used,
Not the
yeah,
I love
no,
the word. I love the word. Some of
right,
my best friends are artists.
right, but I feel like many of us as a whole feel as though we're artists and we're emotional, and
Mhm.
that is a lot of what drives, a lot of our decision making and things like that.
That and the information that's put in front of you, and then you get emotional about it. I will never argue with anybody that the industry is not emotional because the industry is fundamentally creative. And because you're creative, it doesn't mean you're artist. My father was crazy creative for young people back in the day. Corey, you may or may not remember this, but we actually had matchbooks. My father was a smoker. In the early, when I was a young kid, people didn't have lighters unless they were fancy lighters. So they would have their matchbook and they'd open it, and do the match. Well, in the matchbooks back in the day, there would be these little cartoon characters that it would say, draw this, and you mail it in. And it was a business thing. And maybe you can be an artist, and they would have you buy like artist stuff. It was a gimmick. My father could nail those things. Like, he could draw like nobody's business, like beautiful stuff. But my father was not an artist. He was creative, fundamental. My father, heterosexual man, would make sense why I said that in a moment. He would make the most spectacular Easter baskets. Like, when Easter happened, I'd be like, how, where do we get these Easter? They were just like crazy cool, like so creative. Well, my dad would make them the night before the Easter bunny came. I didn't find it out for years later. My mom was like, "Your dad." I heard this when I was like 14, and I'm like, well, I'm a closeted gay man. Was dad a closeted gay man? Because I would assume only the gay guys could make Easter baskets this cool. But no, dad was dyed in the wool, heterosexual for sure.
Oh my god, that's hilarious. That's so funny. Hey, Gordon, how did we do last year?
I don't even know what we talked about, Corey. Last year was like 5 years
Well, not
ago
even
in my
not even
mind.
not even not even like not even what we chatted with on the podcast necessarily, but as an industry as a whole, like before we go forward, how did we do
Yeah.
last year?
So interestingly, and I've talked before, I love data. I love big picture stuff and trying to sort out the parts and pieces. I love that I've lived this life in the industry where I get to talk to so many different types of people. Everybody from the biggest of the biggest corporate executives, to people in the middle, to salon owners, to sweet people, to influence. I mean, and I'm constantly asking people who have data, which many companies do, share it with me and try to figure it out. And we all struggle. And I don't know if my conclusions are always right. I like to think they're more based on forms of data and connecting the dots than most people. It's not emotional, but there's now something called the Kim report, which is what's the Kim, key indicators. I don't remember what Kim stands for. I should know that. I'm on the board, but it is a report that's created every month for big brands to use. They subscribe to it, and it pulls data from all the POS systems, the booking platforms, and it's fascinatingly well put together. It's the first time I've ever seen really clean data. That's a methodology conversation, but trust me, it's good stuff. And so we have something we can look at now and say, how have we done? Because it aggregates everything from throughout the industry. It pulls about 12,000 businesses, including suites, including chair rental, including 3, 4, 5 chair salons, 6 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 or more. And it categorizes everything. So how are all these different pieces of the pie doing as it relates to top line sales, retail sales, color services, tickets, counts. Like, I've never seen anything so robust. And to your question, we're kind of flat. Different segments are in different places. A lot of it makes sense to me, based on my gut of where we're coming through. Suites and smaller salons are a little bit more challenged than the bigger salons. The big salons, for the first time in a while, are seeing relatively significant growth. But when you put it all together, it basically was a flat year. The flatness was probably driven by price increases because we continue to have some healthy price increases, often unhealthy for the businesses themselves, over time, but substantial. And so when you take away the price increases, we're probably down a little bit. Guest counts for sure down across the entire industry. So that's its own challenge. Frequency of visit. I mean, anybody who's buying the chair, I think, will tell you frequency of visit is a growing challenge. Retail sales down, especially in the smaller businesses, especially in suites, but, bright spots across, all of it. And so when you aggregate it, pretty much flat. And then I would add the emotional piece, going back to what we were talking about a moment ago. Emotionally stressed, emotionally confused, emotionally challenged, I think, in how we look at the business and what some of it might mean to us. Some of it's just because, okay, that was hard. That was a hard year. And okay, I kind of got through it. Also, though, social media, which to me isn't even social anymore, it's marketing media is what social media is.
Yeah,
That's a
I
whole
agree.
different trend. It's completely like I just don't enjoy it at all anymore. Including TikTok, which I really had a good run of like watching dancing cats and things, and even fun hair things, but it's just all turned into marketing. And but there's a lot of misinformation on it, and that drives emotions too. About because when things are hard, we look for villains. I think it's just human nature. We look to blame because we don't want to look always inward, and we're not necessarily feeling we did anything wrong. I worked so hard, and yet I'm struggling. Oh, the brands are bad. Okay, good. Thank God I got somebody to point my finger at. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of angst in the industry. I think that would be probably my biggest like emotional trend in the industry is a feeling of angst, a feeling of what does the future hold. But again, a mirror image of the larger world. I think anybody who's paying attention to the larger world, not just in America, but across the world, there's a lot of angst. Like we're like, where are we going? And so again, that mirror image thing I think really matters.
I know something for me I saw a lot last year was with the not the price increase, what you mentioned, the
Sure.
frequency of visit, like, talking about the
Yeah.
and people saying not to pre-book your client before
Oh,
they leave, and that being a trend. I know, I'm like, why? Why are you not trying to get on someone's book before they leave you? Well, I don't know, I don't understand where that came from or why it became a
I know where it came from. It came from certain coaches, and went viral.
But even the philosophy is, and Gordon, if I'm wrong, let me. You will.
You are.
You will. But the philosophy is that you're only speaking to a small percentage of the industry in the sense that like you are completely booked out for 5 weeks, so now you don't have space for like
Right.
new clients to come in, or
It's
you
like
don't have
almost nobody. It's like almost
for whatever.
nobody.
Right. I mean, but in as long as I've been in the industry, I know very few people that are actually that. And
And I know
even in our suite, the only one who really operates like that I know is Allie,
It's
to
just
where
you
she's
see it
booked up.
on social and then the algorithm sends all these things to you, and it's like, "Why is this a trend?"
right,
It's
right,
small,
right.
it's talking to the smallest percentage.
Yeah, okay.
And also what you just said, is so important. That whole booked up thing. So yeah, it's a very small percentage who are totally booked up. But all the smart people I know who've been rebooking, and I've had so many conversations with people privately about like, I don't know what the hell's people are talking about. I've been rebooking for, pre-booking forever and it works. But those people rarely have allowed their entire books to fill up. They've been smart enough to know they need some breathing room in their book. So they're not looking to fill every single slot. They know they need new clients. I mean, that's just being a smart business person. Leave enough room for new clients. Leave enough room. You don't always understand how many you're going to lose. It's like, yeah, don't pre-book every slot for the next 12 weeks. Like, when a certain percentage is full, you tell them you don't have any pre-books, but you'll always have openings. People cancel, blah, blah, blah. So there's a smart way of doing things. And again, this is important to say relative to this. Like, where's this all coming from? Where's so much of the dysfunction coming from in the industry today? Clickbait. Back to marketing. Social is marketing. It's social as community to me is almost dead. Clickbait is the most effective way today to market because the marketing space is so noisy. And clickbait is where you have headlines where you say things that people just can't help themselves
Yeah,
but to click on, including people like me. I'm like, rebooking is bad. I got to click on it. I'm like,
yeah.
what the hell are they talking about? So there's that part of it too. And that just makes it all worse. But yeah, a lot of behavior is being driven by dysfunction. That dysfunction is coming from marketing, from bad coaches saying stuff that they really shouldn't be saying. And that is coming from people taking advantage of, could go full circle on this conversation, to our emotions.
Yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
it's intense.
Life is intense right now. Life is
Yeah.
intense.
Okay, we've nailed that pretty good. Where are we as far as just as a topic, retail? Where are we moving forward with retail?
Yeah.
You mentioned
I
it
love this
before.
conversation. I
Yeah,
love this
I know
conversation.
you do. That's why I handed you a big old fat softball there.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I've been listening to so many people, especially in the coaching space and in the podcast space, talking about, that retail is bad, that retail is dead, that retail fell off a cliff last year. And again, I have the stats, which is, so interesting. Now the brands will tell you retail is having a problem. There's no doubt about it. Retail's always had a problem, so, but this last year, it was off like 5% according to the Kim data. That's not falling off a cliff. Now we're talking about some, these big brands are millions of dollars. Retail historically has been about $4 billion a year at the salon level. 4 billion, billion with a B.
Whoa.
It's a big number. We're a $50 billion industry at service and 54 including retail. There's not a lot of controversy around those numbers. And actually you can do some math that lets you just back into it and go, yeah, that's probably pretty solid. So, we lost about 7% of that. I mean, that's a lot of money. I mean, 10% would be 400 million. So, it's a lot, but you have to divide that over a million working professionals and a whole right around, I think it's 600,000 businesses as part of a million, because anybody who's renting, is a business of one. So yeah, and you have about 120,000 salons now that are left, which is the lowest it's been in much of my career. So retail is struggling. The reasons for the struggle haven't changed since it started, and so many people buy retail used to be so great and now it's fallen down. And that's because of Amazon and brands selling direct and blah, blah, blah. So brands have been selling direct for 20, 30 years. They were sold direct in the old days by way of diversion. Nobody wants to talk about that. And today, people kind of poo poo it like it's not the same. And Amazon is a different version of what was. It's a more outward facing, honest way of being. We're going to sell on Amazon. I remember when one of the really big brands at one of their giant brand events for hairdressers announced pre-COVID, they're like, we're going on Amazon and here's why, in front of 3,500 people. I was like holding on to my seat. I knew this was coming. And I was like, people are going to freak out because people were freaking out about diversion prior to that. Nothing. Like, no, it
You
wasn't even
know,
a conversation for the rest of the event. Like nothing, and again, this was pre-COVID. So, but here's the bigger reality. The majority of the industry doesn't care about retail. The majority of the industry has never cared about retail. It's a niche, it's a niche. I have friends who've bought their homes with retail who are still living good lives because of retail as salon owners. And it works. And there's been studies done, and this hasn't changed, that prove that the act of recommending retail, just doing it. And my hairdresser, a salon owner in Chicago, he got rid of his retail like 10 years ago. But he always recommends, and his team always recommends. They're really close to an Ulta, and they just finally gave up. They're like, oh, screw it. But they still recommend. And why do they recommend? Because he went to a class and he learned that, a big study by P&G, the act of recommending increases client retention because it shows you care. Like, okay, you did this stuff to my hair. I don't know what the hell to do. I'm an accountant. I'm a lawyer. I'm a doctor. I'm embarrassed to even ask. It's like, or they're not telling me anything. So everything must be okay. I never buy retail from them. They know that. I just got this balayage thing, but they haven't said a word about products. So I guess I could do it. I could do whatever I want. Kitchen sink detergent on my head. And so they've proven that when people say, by the way, here's how you take care of your hair, whether you buy it or not from me, that's irrelevant. I mean, they don't say those words necessarily, but use this kind of product, that retention goes up. It's like, it's in a crazy good way. Oh, but
isn't it like
most have never
70%?
cared.
Isn't it like 70% of people who have an appointment purchase something within the next 24 hours, like after they have a hair? There was a stat like
Yeah.
that a while ago.
I don't know where that came from, and so it may be true. And if they look, most hairdressers who've been successful in retail will tell you, once they started asking people, recommending in a proper way, not shoving product down people's throat, not saying, hey, do you want to buy this? And then losing their confidence when somebody says no. And they just started practicing recommending and accepting those who made the purchase, and gave people a good reason, like a doctor would. Like to say, well, like doctors, your doctor would send you out without telling you how to take care of yourself when you got home. Even if you have like the flu, they tell you drink a lot of water when you get home. It's kind of like, don't, use Prel, on your hair after you got a balayage. So that might be a true number, but we've never been able to leverage it. And I guarantee the average hairdresser doesn't even know the number exists. So, and again,
Wait,
in this current world, the information that reaches people, the negative stuff reaches us, right? All of us. It doesn't matter, what our political affiliation is. We all just hear such negative stuff today. It's true in the industry. We absorb the negative, and when someone says, "Oh, do it, here's the right way," most of us don't even see it or hear it. And the algorithms, again, are pushing us clickbait. They push us negativity. They push negativity to me because I click on it because I want to know what people are saying, and then I miss out sometimes on the positive too. And retail, we have never been successful. People are like, brands are greedy. No, here's the history. Brands came to us and said, we have this great idea, high-end product meant for the salon, requires a recommendation. It's a little more complicated. Drugstore is not going to be able to handle this. And we're going to make this exclusive for you. And they tried for a long time. And most hairdressers just didn't sell. They didn't know how to sell. They didn't want to sell. I'm not a salesperson. I'm an artist. And that was the story for a long time. And then companies start getting acquired. L'Oreal is a publicly held corporation. Henkel is a publicly held corporation with 5 hair care brands. L'Oreal's got 5 hair care brands. Unilever has multiple hair care brands. Olaplex is a publicly held company. None of this was true 25 years ago. When you get publicly held, you have an obligation to shareholders who say you have to grow. And it's kind of like, well, we're in this salon space and it's hard to grow because they're not growing and they don't want to retail. So they kind of have no choice but to find another place to sell it. To me, the hairdressers who aren't trying, I'm like, why are you upset about something you don't even do?
Right.
5% of the industry, 5% of all dollars in the industry is historically retail. 7% is the high number. Some people, I was listening to a podcast the other day and somebody said, that it used to be 15. I was like, it was never even broke 10. So when you look at that number, those of us that look at the numbers, what it says is that we're failing. And because we're buying from publicly held corporation, they had to find another channel. They had to. And my friends who sell a lot of retail, their numbers are off, but they're still making a lot of money. And then there's so much confusion about the math of retail. These big opening buys. Oh my God, the big opening buy. Big opening buys are mostly gone now, and they've always been in prestige brands. So anyway, I'll stop there.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, my challenge with retail is, and again, for all to be completely honest, I'm in a suite, right? So it becomes like
Yep.
it becomes like space too. Like what space is available,
Yeah. Yeah.
to bring in a bunch of bottles. It's also like, as a small business that's running on like tight margins, like how much
Totally.
money do I want to have on my shelf, behind
Right.
me.
Yep.
So it becomes that. So not even necessarily the big buy-ins, but there's an expectation of what product you're gonna hold. Now, the thing that's nice about being in a suite is that, as most hairdressers, we have about 5 products that we really, really love and we really, really
Totally.
use, and
Yep.
then so you can have the access to those 5, let's say, and you don't have to
Yep.
carry the whole brand that just gets dusty, on
Well,
there.
there's also things now like Liquid AI where you put in the product that you're selling and you can see how much you're selling of like
Totally.
you keep like a bunch of stuff and then just keep the ones that sell the most, and
Right.
have little,
Totally.
so there's a way to do it
But e
and
but
still
even
make
to
money.
Gordon's point,
And good
that
retailers always did that. Good retailers always did that.
yeah, the product that is selling is the one that you're recommending.
Of
Like,
course.
Right.
nothing's going off the
Right.
shelf that you're not recommending.
Yeah.
Right. Because there's a lot of SKUs, and that comes from big brands needing to find new things to sell. That's a whole different conversation. So one of the big fallacies about retail is, it's not profitable, whatever. It remains the most profitable SKU item thing on the menu in most salons. If you do a single bottle, you just make a higher percentage that you make on most of the thing. If you're in a suite, it's very confusing because you're the only person there, so that's a little bit different conversation. But it's not so much about profitability. I mean, profitability really matters to me. It's hard to prove that it can't be profitable. Where everybody gets in trouble is on bringing product in and putting it on the shelf, and that's about cash flow. And cash flow and profitability are different. I mean, if you take the cash that's coming into your business and you got some profits there or some extra cash, which again is different than profits, and you put it all on the shelf and it just sits there, that's a bad business decision. That's not really relevant to your potential profitability. It's relevant to cash flow. And if you don't understand cash flow, you're going to put yourself out of business regardless of your profit margins. So let's say you're really profitable, but you take all the money and you go buy, a giant head spa machine, and you go buy a fancy barber chair, and you put all your cash flow into stuff. That stuff is an asset. It doesn't make you unprofitable. It just makes you unsustainable as a business. You don't have cash to run your business every day. Those are two very different concepts that the whole industry struggles to understand.
So what about the movement in suites? Are you still seeing majority suites?
No, well, it was never the majority of suites. That's really important. Share rental is way bigger than suites. Always has been. It's like, way bigger, way, way bigger. It's like 100,000 to 300,000. The majority rent. A chair in
Okay.
a salon. It's always been a bigger number. And we had more chair rental before we had suites. I mean, COVID is what really blew up suites. It was blowing up before then, but COVID set it on fire. What I hear from the suite companies is that growth has pretty much leveled off for them. They're not opening a lot of new buildings. There's not a lot of need for new buildings. And some of the bigger suite companies, there's like 5 of them, I think, that are, the big ones. two of the big ones I've talked to have told me that their strategy going forward, because they've seen new people coming in the aggregate, because people leave, right? So coming in, going out, they're kind of net zero or net a little bit positive at this point. And of course, that's how they decided they need to open more units, greater demand than supply. That's leveled off. And now what we're starting to see is the big suite companies are looking to purchase small independent suite companies. So like in Chicago where I lived, I had three independent suite organizations, just one-offs, building 15 suites owned by, somebody who wanted to do that, maybe a hairdresser, maybe not, maybe a salon owner, maybe not. And now the big companies are buying those. Like maybe there's a big franchisee in XYZ company in Chicago who owns three big buildings, one in the city, two in the burbs. They want to continue to grow, but the demand's not there. So they're acquiring these smaller ones to add more revenue. So different. It has leveled off.
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty fortunate in the suite that we're in. There's never vacancies,
That's great. That's very
they're like
great.
they're a small chain, like
In that one location. They have 10 locations, and I
right.
would
Yeah,
Okay.
and
So
say
that's
they're
obviously the one that we're in, right?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, they have one that's, like, 20 minutes from us that's only half all the time. That's when
okay.
I did that sign in the
So
back.
they're a regional suite company. They're
Yeah, yeah,
not
exactly.
in
Mm,
yeah, yeah. And that's the group that are now being acquired
Mhm.
by the larger companies. So, one day, who knows, maybe that regional company will sell to a big company. The big company will have some growth. They bought the growth, right? Maybe bring their best practices to that half empty one to see if they can get more people into it. And that's the transition of the business model as the economy tends to do what it's doing. Yeah, so supply and demand. And we're seeing the pendulum swing back. So this Kim report tracks how many service providers are in each of the categories. And the only category that's seeing growth in the team, and they only track service providers. They don't look at receptionists or back room people, just the service provider. The only category growing its people are the 20 plus salons. And they had a bump in the size of their teams last year. And that's, makes us think, and from what we're hearing, because no one's talking about labor shortage anymore, that's a really fascinating conversation too. Pre-COVID, the whole industry was, we need more people, we need more people. We're done with that conversation. And so many folks are, if they do need somebody, they want to get someone who's already trained. They prefer to bring someone back from a suite or from perhaps another salon that's not competitive to them. And we see growth there, which is really kind of fascinating.
That's interesting because my next question was gonna be where are the big salons? Where are the like industry wide? Like I don't even know what the big salon would be, plus 15 or something. I don't know. Is this still
Not so much plus 15 because we've that whole sector has shrunk. So during COVID, we definitely saw a consolidation. Five locations went down to three. And I've not seen stats that are clear on what the total shift is. And that category includes like the franchisees, the big organizations. But what I see in more the luxury space, the three, four, five, or to your point, 13 or whatever that number might be, that
well, I meant 15
it has
operators in a
shrunk.
salon.
It has shrunk. Hmm?
Right. I meant 15 operators in a salon. Like what I don't know what that line I don't know what that line is as far as what's a big salon, what's a moderate salon or
20
whatever.
plus, 20 plus would be the big ones. Yeah. And so the I think it's the 5 to 9, no, it's the 10 to 19 group, I think that's done the best in terms of growth of revenue. But growth of teams is in that 20 plus group. They're hiring more people.
What on the average, and I'm talking about like a base, not basic, there's nothing basic about it, but a traditional commission salon, what is the average salon side as far as like, hair operators?
Average.
You could throw in
I think the average hasn't really changed very much. I think the average is still the 3 to 4.
3 to 4. Wow.
Yeah. I
I'm
mean,
surprised.
it's been that way forever. I don't think it's changed. I think, because there's so many units that we have to remember that when you average things, if you have one group that's like skewing out of control, and we'll use independence that way, because there's hundreds of thousands of them, they bring all the numbers down. So they distort the numbers a little bit.
For sure.
But for my whole career, like the average was like 3.5 people working in a salon. Most salons are small. In Chicago, where I lived, I could take my dog on a walk past 20 salons. And I can tell you those 20 salons were for all kinds of sizes, only one suite company, actually two by the time I left. But putting those aside, probably the average salon was like 6 chairs with 3 people in it. And you have to look at the people, not the chairs.
Yeah, that's fair. And does that also include like barbershops or barbershops, 3 to 5?
No, no, and I don't, I've never seen much work done around the barbers, really good studies that were done. Again, in my neighborhood, I would walk by 4 barbershops, and one of them was like the killer old school barbershop that had 5 chairs, and you had to come in and put your name on a chalkboard, and they were busy every single day of the week. It's 24/7. They, people
Awesome.
lining up for that place, Gabby's it's called. And then the other barbershops were like, 2 chair. Well, one's a 4 chair, and I misspoke because there's 2 that came in like pre-COVID, and they're crazy. One's called Kings, and I think they're 12 chair, and they're jammed all the time.
Whoa,
And there's another one that's similar right up the block from them, and they're a similar size and also always jammed. They were kind of the new iteration, the cool barbershops, that we saw blow up from social media. And they were still doing well when I left 4 months ago.
that's awesome.
But the social chatter is that a lot of barbershops have closed and will continue to close. I think it's the
That
small
too.
ones.
I've heard that too.
Why is that, you think?
Supply and demand, there's too many of them.
Mhm.
The competition, it's just again, just so many of them. Plus, we had such a huge influx of barbers in the last 10 years because of social media. Some would argue, I believe, there's no data to prove it, that when you bring in a group that's that big, was the demand there? Like, just because all of a sudden barbering is cool, does that mean you have enough demand to offset bringing in lots of people? And I think they just weren't aligned. We brought in more people than it could support them making a good living. Bad business training. There's not a lot of good business training for barbers. It's more about the cool looks and the cool cuts. We have the same problem on the hairdressing side. I mean, think about this. We've transitioned, from, like I said before, maybe 20, 25% of the industry owning a business, right? Suite is owning a business, running a chair is owning a business. From the IRS perspective, you're a business of one. All salons, are owned by someone that makes them business persons. We knew when we didn't have this many business people, hundreds of thousands of them, that most people weren't very good at running businesses. They were, Katie, back to you, artists, and the industry's never done a great job teaching people how to be good business people. I mean, there's a lack of information. And so as the more and more business people we have, the more and more people who are going to fail. And I think the barber space has the least amount of good business training, proportional to how many barbers there are. And so I just think that a lot of them are just failed out, just thought they were going to make more money and didn't.
Did. Yeah. Where are the brands? We always like talking about the brands and where they
Yeah.
are and what's happening with them this year. What's going on with them?
Well, they're always reflective of how the industry is. If the industry is having a hard time, and especially if retail's kind of soft, they're going to feel that. We've had the consolidation of brands, and there's a lot of chatter right now about some very big brands that will probably get acquired in the next 12 to 24 months. And it's pretty consistent chatter. So I think we're about to see a new round of consolidation. For big companies to grow, especially in a market like ours, where the salon in the aggregate's not really growing like it used to, these big companies have stockholder pressure to get more sales. Sometimes they buy that. They buy more sales. It's like, okay, you acquire a big brand. Look at Pulp Riot. That's been a while now since they were purchased by L'Oreal. They were doing something in a space that nobody else really was doing, with the vivid colors at that time. Others were doing it. I mean, you certainly had, Joico and Pravana and some others. But Pulp Riot, was doing things in a really unique way. And L'Oreal bought them to acquire their uniqueness and also to bring in that category. And so same thing continues to happen. And so there'll be some growth by some big brands, but it'll be by way of acquisition. I mean, the salon space feel, and you said it, Corey. And I think again, as we have more and more independence, or we recognize that it's such a big category now, you have less interest in selling some of this stuff. And that just becomes a challenge, period, end of story. But it's not as bad as people think. I mean, if sales are off 7% for salons, it might be something similar for some brands. And that's not the end of the world. It's not good for a big brand. And again, they may acquire themselves out of it. Big brands have cut way back on education. I think that's the giant. If I had anything to say negative about the brand space, it's like the education cuts during and post COVID were pretty massive. But a lot of that was because so much of that money was going into traditional salons and they were evaporating. This new generation that's come in, let's say the under 30 crowd, a lot of them have never had a great in salon class. They just never had it. You mentioned you grew up in Reg Law's salon, so it's Intercoiffure. I'm assuming he had some great brand relationships. I'm assuming when you were younger, maybe you had some great folks come into your salon and teach? Maybe not, because people also forget. When I was listening to one of the podcasts talk about, some of this brand stuff, and they're like, well, a lot of salon owners, they don't want the kind of educators coming in. Like they want, the stars. Well, they never came in. I mean, if you were really a gigantic salon, you'd get the top name, you'd get Sam Villa in your salon. But that wasn't normal, you know. You got the regional educator, you got the local educator. So I do think something this happened at the brands. One thing in particular, the massive shift in education and the massive idea that they could move it to digital because that's what they heard people wanted. And I think we should never forget that most of us really don't want education. You know,
Don't
we
want the
want to have
education, period.
no, they don't. No, we don't. They've never participated, in big numbers as much as people think. In my growing up in the industry, it was like education was the thing. It will transform your life. And a lot of people had that experience. But for a lot of those same people, it just got shoved in front of them. Okay, salon, you got to come in on your day off and you're going to get trained. That
Yeah.
created its own problems. But then you,
Sure.
you did have some killer educator. You did see new and you got to participate. Well, this new generation, a lot of them have never experienced that. They've experienced a different version. They've got the C team in front of them. They went to a beauty show. Oh my God, 'cause I love beauty shows, still love beauty shows, but they're a shadow of themselves when it comes to the quality of the education you would get at the show, especially on the show floor, which that wasn't like true education, but even the classrooms, it's just not what it was. It is, on average. I mean, you go to shows. I mean, curious, what's your take on the state of education as it relates to trade shows? There's still lots of it, but
Yeah, I mean, and to be fair, like when we go to shows, I don't. There's we're never in the classrooms. We just don't have
yeah,
time.
that's true.
We're,
That's
we're
true.
running around. We see a lot
Yeah,
of the stuff that's happening on the stage and stuff, and that's just, it's mainly like what celebrity is giving what
right.
advice off of what stage is kind of what
Yeah,
that looks like.
yeah, yeah,
I don't, I can't. It wouldn't be fair for me to have any opinion about what's happening in the
yeah.
classroom because it's just not. We don't have the time to
Okay.
kind of do that
No,
thing.
we'll go with my opinion as the authority on this issue.
You have it, but even like to talk about what we talked about earlier, and that's the confusion, and there's so much confusion in the industry as a whole. Like, I couldn't imagine being in the industry now under 30 and
Right.
like and getting caught up with and in that same confusion, like Katie and I, we've been around long enough to where we can kind of source out, that sounds a little bit like BS. That doesn't really add up. But if you're under 30 and you don't even have the experience to know what's bad, what's wrong, and you're at the stage of your life too where you want to blow up the man anyways, you know
Right. Right.
it's very
All of that.
confusing to
And that stuff anchors your entire career. What happens in your that first 10 years anchors your future in a good way or bad.
and
Yeah.
that's why I'm so grateful to come up in Reg Law's salon, to be honest.
With having worked with so many educators, there for me, there's 2 different types. There is the brand educator, where they're just
Mhm,
teaching what the brand wants them to teach, and they're just
mhm,
kind of a
mhm.
messenger. They're not really not the independent that can create the curriculum.
Just dog.
And right, and I think that it's 2 different things. If you're sitting in Ashley Norman's class, you're getting life-changing information. You know what I
Uh-huh.
mean? Like, but if it's something that's presented by a brand, it just feels too corporate most of the time. It feels like
Yeah,
it's not really. Yeah.
authentic.
Yeah, it just doesn't feel like it's information that is going to make me better behind the chair. And that's the big thing I'm seeing with education, and maybe it's just because I am kind of what we're talking about with negative stuff, right? Like, this algorithm that's being sent to me from what I'm seeing, like, I think there's a lot of good messengers, and I'm seeing the brands bulk up a little bit on, their teams and who they're bringing on, but it's like, are they doing that because for social and for the shows and for that, or are they doing it, what's the purpose of that?
Education has always been under marketing. That's where it lived for most companies. So when you are in those companies looking at their budgets, the reason for education was to market. And you take some of the big brands and they literally had over 10,000 educators on payroll. So you had this army of educators who were in the field. I remember when I talked years ago in front of a beauty school that was a brand beauty school, and students did a Q&A at the end. People wanted to be educators. I want to be a platform artist. I want to be an educator. I'm like, okay, so what does that mean to you? And somebody said, oh, I know I have to start, I want to start as a national educator. I was like, okay, let's talk about what is a national educator. And they gave me their sense. And I'm like, so let me tell you about that particular brand. They're not unlike others. I said, so they're national. I know some of their national educators who live in the same city we all live in. And I says, and when you ask for to be a national educator, that means that you get to go to the salons in your city and to the burbs. I said, so a big faraway trip will be out to Schaumburg, which is 20 minutes outside the city. And so there was these armies of educators, and they had labels on them that a lot of people misunderstood. They were always marketers. And back in the day, before we had social media, again, Sam Villa is always a great one to pick out. Redken educator forever, top, 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 top. If you're lucky enough to bring him in, he was there to help market those products. But he's freaking Sam Villa. I mean, he could do it in a way few could. I would argue in the current world, someone like Ashley Norman can do it in a way few could, because most of the independent educators have brand contracts, if they're any good. They do. I don't know if Ashley does, but some of my favorite influencer educators, have brand contracts. So it kind of slips in. But at the end of the day, what's most interesting on the influencer side is they've had to climb their own ladder. Like, you have to climb up the ladder in the brand side in the old days, and in the current days, it's different today. But you still have to kind of work your way up. The working your way up is faster, but the working your way up includes building a big following, on social. It's just, they're connected, and then the shows look at you. And again, if you're that certain type of unicorn educator, like an Ashley Norman, then that's, you can be life changing in the classroom. And if you're not Ashley Norman, you're a couple levels below, you might have the same intention, you just can't get there. And perhaps your brand training, and again, perhaps Ashley does some of that too, you just don't have the ability to kind of separate that and still be like Ashley Norman, who will be profound no matter what she's doing in her contracts, because she's that unique in how she does what she does, I think, and has charisma too. And so nothing's changed in my mind. It's a different version of the same. It's a different version of, there was always the unicorns. We still have the unicorns. They just take a different path. And lastly, the independent educators touch just a tiny sliver of the industry. They don't have the ability in a deep education way, a full day, for example. They're not touching tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people. They can't, just try
Yeah.
to add them all up and say, okay, we got 1 million working hairdressers. How many people are the independents even touching? Just a tiny little sliver. I wish we had
Well, and if
more
you're
of those
saying people
people.
don't even want it.
Well, I'm saying generally speaking. So I'm not to say, I want to be clear, there's lots of people who want it, lots of people benefit. They see that it goes, hey, the big motivation in life, what's your why? And when you hear by listening to podcasts and you listen to social that brands are bad, clickbait, again, brands have built the industry's been built
Can't
upon
wait to put
brands.
all these clips together and just have Gordon going, brands are
Clickbait.
bad.
Brands are bad. Brands are bad.
This is bad.
The
Like,
industry,
why are we putting on independent education?
no, but as I said, there's great, look, you guys work with Presley. Presley's another unicorn. Presley Poe is a unicorn. She's very unique. To me, there's like 10 unicorns, I mean,
Yeah.
I haven't made the list, but truly, and again, Presley's one, Ashley's one, there's a few others. And then some of the unicorns have gotten massive brand contracts, and they've kind of gone down that path. Nothing wrong with that at all. And they're getting those massive contracts, so they got to pitch the product. It's part of what happens. They kind of all get together. Truly, it's important to understand, that it's kind of the 80-20 rule. They say it always affects almost every part of life. I would say probably 20% of the industry really deeply cares about education. They get it. They seek it out. They show up in the classrooms at the beauty shows. They go to the big brand events. That's the 80-20 rule of that. 80-20, 20%, excuse me. I don't even know where it's at. Potential spam. Sorry about that.
Even in
Um,
Mexico.
Yeah, 80-20, 80-20 rule applies to, successful salons versus not successful salons, people who get retail and who don't get retail. And just one of those things, it just seems to be, I'll attach it occasionally to artistry, artists, but not artists, going back to that one. I always love this. I believe this so strongly, and I've been talking about it for 20 years. If the industry is an industry of artists, which I don't think it is, it's an industry of crafts people who happen to be highly creative, and yay, but maybe they don't hone their skills in such a way that they can, achieve the artist level. But to me, the proof point is just walking down the street. Just walk down the street. I don't see a lot of art walking around on heads. I see more bad haircuts than good haircuts. I see more bad hair color than good hair color. I can't tell what's box color and what's regular. So there is that aspect. You just don't see a lot of great hair when you walk around America or spend time in airports like I do. Or even when you look at the corporate people, you can tell them in the airports. It's like, okay, those are more upskilled people in terms of probably the lives they live. You know, look at people in first class. I'm just kind of like, for artists, we're kind of slacking a little bit behind the chair.
True
And it's
story.
okay not to be an artist. It's okay not to be artist. What's most important is to be a great craftsperson, and more than a great craftsperson, and we've all heard this so often, the hairdresser who's got the people skills, the service skills, the empathy for a client, the ability to have a great conversation. That's what most of us clients seek out. I'm a client. I don't understand a good haircut. Clearly, I don't have one. I need my hairdresser was in an accident, and I haven't had a haircut for 8 weeks.
No.
Oh
Yeah, and
no.
I'm married to a hairdresser, but to keep my marriage secure, I don't allow my hairdresser husband to touch my hair. But
That's such a
but
good thing to do, Gordon.
I know.
uh,
Good
it's,
boundary there.
I know.
advice to everybody on boundaries. So, but
I mean,
anyway,
I've
yeah, I
always
mean, I think that's so key.
yeah, I've always looked at myself as a service provider. Like, I'm there to make the client happy. I'm not if I'm producing what I think looks good, it's
Yep.
half the time not what they're walking out with. Like,
Right.
I'm not doing
Yeah.
what
Right.
I want, it's what they want.
Right. And you make them feel good. Look, I'm a service provider in a different way. I work in the service of hairdressers in the work in the service of brands, and I try to be a good person. I try to be an empathetic person, a kind person. I mean, big part of my career has been service is the way I view it. And
Yeah.
it's an honorable way to live your life. I think it's much more honorable to be a service provider than it is to be a practitioner of something, a tradesperson, a person who comes into a house and fixes the pipes and never says hello, the plumber. I just think, there's a human element to our careers, especially in this industry. It's way more important. David Wagner, a million years ago, another great guest for your podcast, David Wagner with jute salons, he wrote a book about being a day maker and just how powerful it was to make somebody's day every opportunity you had in the salon. Yeah, do a great haircut. Give them what they paid for. Make their day special because you have that ability and opportunity if you double down on it, and they'll pay you back. They will keep coming to you because you make their day every time that you see them. That's what matters most in this industry. That's how we change people's lives, not through a haircut.
All right, we're 50 minutes in, and I haven't even asked you about AI. But what's going on with AI?
I know, how we
Uh,
haven't even touched on it
I
yet.
know exactly what's going
Oh,
on with AI, and and not. I mean, I guess we have to get to the overall, but even like, how is it being used in the industry and the salons? And can it make your day? Can it make your day better?
I believe absolutely it can. I think, there's two things to always think about with anything. It's what are the positive aspects of that thing that you're bringing into your life, and what's the potential negatives? And we shouldn't hide from the negatives. And again, you can apply it to almost anything, even what product you decide to bring into your salon based on the kind of clients you have and the kind of clients you serve. So with AI, I think it's really important. There's a lot of nervousness about it. It still exists. You can find all the videos on YouTube about, how it's going to destroy the world. And I've always said, as much as I'm drawn to it, I love it. I'm obsessed with it in so many ways. We can do an hour on that someday. But yeah, there's challenges. I always compare it to nuclear power, nuclear energy. Yeah, most horrific weapon ever developed for mankind. Did horrific things, when it first came out. But nuclear power has changed the world in a good way. It's brought third world countries into the modern world by providing power to places that couldn't have power in a way that was economically feasible. And so there's good and bad to so many things. So AI in the wrong hands, we should all be concerned about. I'm worried as can be about the election coming up because I see so many videos on Instagram. I'm kind of like, is that a real video or is that AI? I can't even tell. And so that should worry us as a tool, to have a better career, have a better life. I use AI every single day, and I've developed my relationship with the AI that I use so it is truly an assistant to me. I mean, it knows me. I can say to it, I call mine Mary. So I can say, Mary, I'm going to a podcast, with Corey and Katie, and I'm going to be talking about trends. So, hey, give me a recap. Give me like the 5 top trends, that you see out in the larger world. I didn't do that today, but I often do. I'm getting ready to do a presentation, just give me some thought starters because there's so much information in my head. I don't even know where to begin. Boom, it gives it to me. Now, I have a very close relationship with my AI, meaning I've trained the hell out of it. It knows everything that I know. We've worked together on so many things and it just knows me. And so it takes me in a direction that is connected to who I am professionally. And that's really important. That makes your AI really powerful. If you just use it to have a better Google search, that's okay, you know, but that's what it is. It's just become a better search tool. I use it literally in every aspect of my life. My husband will often say to me when we either disagree on something or we're not sure how to do something or what's the right way or what is that thing that we want to get in the drugstore. He started doing this several months ago. He's like, "Hey, ask Mary what she thinks." And that's true. That's a true story. So for the industry, I think the big transformation right now, and I'll go back to Inner Coffee or these big salons. I first presented AI in one of their main stage presentations in fall of 23. And I did 5 events in a row. They do 2 big events every year. 5 events in a row. They kept bringing me back to have an updated conversation, what's happening with AI. My first conversation, there was 400 people in the audience and like 3 or 4 of them lit up. And you know, when you've done it, when you're on a stage, you're looking at a group of people and they're all frowning at you. As a speaker, you're like,
Yeah, totally.
how do I turn this around? You know, and there was no way. By the 5th conversation I had with them, which was last fall in New York, I get another 400 people, and they did like a survey thing. Like 90% were using it in some way, shape, or form. And I met with 3 salon owners about how
By
they
the way,
were
the other
using it.
10% is using it and not knowing it.
What's that?
And the other 10% is not is using
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
not
yeah,
knowing
yeah, yeah.
it.
That's important to say because all our social media, as one example of many, our phones, so much AI in them. But they're actually using them in their businesses. I interviewed 3 salons using it in every part of their business. One of my favorites is Gadabout Salons in Arizona. They have 100 and some employees, and they do the one-on-one managers with team members to evaluate how you doing, how can we help you, how could you improve, all that feedback to help people grow. And they found a big problem in the business was how do you get Gen X managers to communicate effectively with Gen Z team members, and they were really struggling. They took it to Gemini, and now before they have these meetings, and the team knows about it. It's not hidden; they're very transparent. The managers sit down with all the information they would normally prepare to have that one-on-one, and have a conversation with Gemini about how to effectively communicate what they want to communicate across generations. And they've seen the response from the team and the feelings of the managers go through the roof in a positive way because it just helped them improve their communication skills. That's amazing. That's amazing. San Mercado Salon in New York, I was talking to the general manager of the operation, and she's like, Gordon, across our entire team, because we now have agents and educational agents and also productivity agents that we've built because we're obsessed with AI as a company to help our team be more productive. They love it. Help our team get more information about products if they're curious. They love it. I, the general manager, have an agent that helps me in my scheduling, in my prioritizing my emails and responses to the team, my prioritization, my goal set, blah, blah, blah. She's like, I am building my team in ways I've never built it before without adding a penny to payroll. I feel like I have more members on my team. It's AI, I get it, but we couldn't afford to. She's like, I can't afford a personal assistant in the business model. We do well, but we do well because we keep things tight. I have a personal assistant named Quinn. Hers is named Quinn. And Quinn helps me manage my day, my time. They've also brought in Universe Walker's AI platform, Beauty AI, which is a front desk. They now have a concierge front desk that's all AI, answers the phone when the business is closed. They're not getting rid of their receptionist who they adore and who their clients adore. But when nobody's there to answer the phone, maybe she's busy with clients, the AI does. And it's amazing AI. And they're like, our business is growing because someone, quote unquote, answers the phone, comes off really well, is really helpful. It's transparent and says, I'm AI. And they're booking appointments at 10 o'clock at night that they weren't booking before. That the AI helps the person because most people don't want to go straight to a booking platform. So anyway, it's happening in more and more numbers, people getting more and more comfortable with it for all parts of their business, especially marketing. But most importantly, all the POS systems, the Forests of the world, the Zenoti of the world, the Mevos of the world, they're making massive investments and rolling out new AI products all the time, all the time. I saw Barry Quinn with Forrest at Serious Business. He did a great presentation on all the new AI centric products that Forrest is rolling out, including ways to understand your numbers better, marketing tools. Zenoti launched in the fall an AI concierge, similar to what I was talking about that Universe has with Universe is Beauty Desk AI. That's what it's called. Go check it out. Beauty Desk AI. Google it. But Zenoti has one, and really good. when I got introduced to it, the next day they're like, "Oh, by the way, our AI receptionist, concierge receptionist, which will answer our customers' phones and book appointments and answer questions that people have. It learned how to speak Spanish when we weren't paying attention."
Perfect.
I
Press
mean,
That's
7
so
for
funny.
Spanish. It's
it's
amazing.
Gordon,
amazing.
this is all such great information. Could you, just to kind of wrap up, of the past and then coming into 2026, what's like some things you're looking forward to for 2026 in our
Ooh, good.
industry?
Something I look for every year to start with, which is in spite of all the challenges I've seen the industry go through, 2008, 2009 recession, COVID, recessions before that, because I came into the industry in 78. So I've lived through a lot of cycles. And in every one of those cycles, the smartest people around me always said, but look for the opportunities because everybody's struggling to get through it. But there's always opportunities, look for the opportunities. Like 2007, 8, 9, whatever that rough period, which was a transformational time in a lot of negative ways for the industry, how the media was impacted, how shows were impacted, all that sort of, and how salons were impacted. That's when we had the ombre. That was an opportunity that some people came up that as time went on became kind of problematic, but a lot of people made some really good money at a time they needed to by finding an opportunity. There's always opportunity. We talked about retail. Like, I just think that remains one of the biggest opportunities. Brands don't pay me, brands, but I love brands because they bring innovation to the industry that without we would be still where we are in the 1960s. We still have beauty parlors, we've moved well beyond it. So I think there remains many, many opportunities to get educated, to be smarter, especially at business. In business, you need to put as much energy into learning business, all the things that drive a business forward, all the things that could get in your way that you have to understand how to deal with and anticipate and course correct for. That's way harder than a balayage. If you're a salon owner
Amen.
who's still behind the chair, or you're a salon owner who maybe has transitioned out, you just need to understand how really important it is. And that you're in one of the great things about this industry is how giving it is. That's what you guys do as podcasters. Every time you do something, you are giving. I know you guys for a long time now, and I know that's, at the heart of who you are and what you do and why you do this, and that's who we are. And if you're a person who's trying to understand business, go find a mentor who's done what you want to do. And that's not a coach, go find coaches, good coaches, not so easy, but go find
Gordon's
a
good coach
mentor.
list will be coming out soon. Gordon's good coach list will be coming out soon.
Yeah, I haven't got enough names to put the list out yet.
It's not a list. It's like one.
Yeah.
It's like one.
There's there's more than one. There's some coaches who I have mad respect for. Some who I know and some who I don't. There's some really good coaches who have transformed lives just the same way that Sam Villa has transformed lives by teaching them about the art and the craft. There's business people out there doing the same thing, but we don't do enough of it, and that in and of itself is an opportunity. And just because, someone says that, guess what, you can be a business for yourself, and that's one of the great things about the industry. It's perhaps the most challenging thing about the industry. And I'll end that little bit of a rant with something I think is super important to understand. The opportunity to do great technical work with a client, to spend time with a client, is 100% dependent on the ability to sit on top of a good business. If your business isn't good, if your business isn't secure, you don't get to do balayage for long. There's a lot of people who went independent and just didn't know how to be independent as a business person who lost their careers, literally. There's many people who've opened salons over the years, because I've watched this over decades, who, went from having a good life doing work for somebody to having a very difficult life running a business and trying to support team members and do all that stuff, and eventually lost everything. And have met many of them who over the time said, I wish I had just stayed behind the chair. It would have been so much easier. Not that that's easy. None of it's easy. As I said, Sam Mercado, it's not complicated, our business models, but it's hard. It's hard. So back to something I heard when I first came in the industry in the late 1970s, education. There's just nothing more important. Education. Because even if you know it all, you have to stay inspired. And the best way to get inspired is to go get some more education, just to build, even if you just build a little bit more. That's why I love podcasting. I think what you all do is what I try to do is we educate people, that's such a big and important part of this. And kudos to those of us who do it. Shouldn't give kudos
Kudos
to
to you.
myself. But kudos to everybody. You all and all the podcasters together now influence more people than the media does, than the beauty media. We're bigger than the beauty media, and that's important to say. And that's important for us all to understand as a former media person. That comes with responsibility. Just like being every part of our industry, we have responsibility to somebody, to our clients, to our teams, if we're a salon owner, right? To our customers, if we're a brand or we're a distributor. And as people who do what we do, we have a responsibility to our audience, to make sure we're sharing information that's good and well intentioned and not clickbaity and not say the bullshit. So somebody will, want to buy a coaching session from us if we live on that side of the space.
Oh, so I take it a little bit different, Gordon. Like I don't ever want to be the expert. So like even if
No,
I
your
did,
guests, your guests,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
but what I'm saying is like even if I don't agree with my guess necessarily, maybe it can benefit somebody that's not me. So I don't really, when it comes down to responsibility, I don't. My responsibility is to get information out there. I don't feel like it's my responsibility to how you absorb it or how you take it. I have people DM me all the time
that
saying I disagreed with you on the podcast, not with me, but with what we were talking about on the podcast, and I go, yeah, yeah, I disagree too, but but I can't, but I don't want to be the gatekeeper either. I guess is what I'm getting.
yeah, I hear that, but you are whether you know it or not, and you do
I
it
was
whether you
thinking
know
that
it or
while he
not
was
because
speaking.
you it's about doing things with intention. What I said before, what I was trying to say is that what you do with a client every day, but from behind the chair, it begins with intention. What's your intention of spending time with that person? Do you intend to do the best work you can possibly do for the money that's being paid? Do you intend, if you employ people, to make your team members have better lives by way of your business? Because when they have better lives, you as an owner have a better life, because, all the ships rise. As podcasters, that we don't bring bullshit guests on who we know, are going to provide bad information to, and you don't, I know that about you. And so, I'll give you kudos for not having an ego, you know, when it comes to some of this stuff. But I know that there's a filter that you're applying, again, knowingly or unknowingly, because there are people in this industry who are just, just about making a buck. And it doesn't make them awful, evil people, perhaps. I don't know what their intentions are sometimes. But I do think as people who put information out, that it is important the intentions that we have. And I think you guys are potentially role models for other people, whether you know it or not, because I've listened to so many guests that you've had on, especially when it comes to things which I think are really powerful that you've presented, which not everybody does. I mean, I don't go down this path with my podcast because it's a little bit different, but you bring a lot of mental health conversations to the industry that are really powerful. You bring a lot of conversations about addiction, that are really, really powerful. You bring some voices from other parts of the world, not from our own industry, to inspire people to have better careers in life. You do all that. You have intention. I know it's there. I know you, Corey.
The intention definitely, no, 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 you absolutely know me. I just yes, yes, yes.
Take
I
the
mean,
compliment.
most
Take the
people,
compliment.
I'm receiving it. I received that, Gordon. Thank you. Gordon, I love you. Thank you so much for making time for us. Once
Love you
again,
both.
it is one of my favorite segments that we get to do every year. And, even to that thing, I think it's responsible that we talk about it. Both, what is and what could be, and that's kind of how
Thank
I
you.
always see these conversations. Mr.
Love
Gordon
it.
Miller, thank you very, very much for joining us on your day off.